everything ultimately will close one day, whether it's 200 years from now or 2 weeks from now. And when people say, I'm depressed, I don't know what's going on, I don't know who I am, I say, shut up and go give somebody a sandwich. There's a million food banks. Just do that once and you'll feel better.
Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of the Catholic Founders Podcast. I'm your host, Silas Maynor. At Catholic Founders, we are on a mission to help understand what exactly is the theology of entrepreneurship and a whole lot more. Obviously, if you've been following us for a while, you know that. We believe that entrepreneurship is about a lot more than just making money or making a name for yourself. We believe that the genes that you inherit and the circumstances that you find yourself in are really a divine calling to use our skills to benefit those around us and to take care of those and to be an instrument of God's will in the world. Again, if you've been following us for a while, you know that. So thank you for tuning back in today. Today we are speaking with Chris McMahon. And if you're like me and have a hard time spelling some of these kind of names, it's M-C-M-A-H-O-N. He's the founder of Aquinas Wealth Advisors. And I actually first encountered Chris back when I was living in New York City. I attended a YCP event where he was on the panel. And I just remember thinking that, this guy was such a kind of a very strong personality, a very boisterous type of person, very gregarious and frank, and has just a really awesome attitude. So I'm very glad that we could have him on the podcast. Now, he has a wide range of topics that he can cover, but we ended up specifically trying to narrow that down and focus on two kind of core things. Number one, how can we really align our finances with our faith? I think this is something a lot of people don't really think about or they don't consider. So we talk a lot about that. And specifically, the way I word it is, how to not ROI max. Obviously, there's a lot of other things that we discuss kind of tangentially related to this, but that's kind of the core theme to our discussion today. Chris has also a lot of amazing stories, so I made sure to ask him about some of those so he could share some. They're just a lot of fun. You'll enjoy this conversation with Chris, I'm sure of it. But before we start, I do want to give a huge shout out to Our Father Constructors and Associates for becoming a sponsor of Catholic Founders. If you are building some sort of project that is real estate related and you want a Catholic group of people to ensure that the project itself gets done on time, correctly, and on budget, reach out to Our Father. You can go learn more about them at ourfather.us. They are an expert project management group specifically helping Catholics build various different projects, whether that's a school or a church or something of that nature. Also, if you are interested in joining the Catholic Founders Guild and you want to surround yourself with others who are pursuing sainthood while building a business, go to join.catholicfounders.com to learn more about the Catholic Founders Guild and sign up today. As a reminder, it's only $100 a year or $10 a month, so anybody can afford it. We are not getting rich off of you joining this. We just want there to be some amount of commitment fee to help us kind of maintain and administer this guild. I'm sure you're going to enjoy it. You can learn more by going to join.catholicfounders.com. All right, without any further delay, enjoy the show with Chris McMahon. All right, Chris, welcome to the podcast. How you doing?
Silas, thank you for having me. I'm glad to be here. I love the work you're doing.
Well, thanks, man. I'm super excited about what you guys are doing. It's not every day that I have finance people on the podcast because usually they're always trying to sell something. But I have heard you speak before, and I really appreciate the kind of the way you carry yourself, the things you're doing broadly in the Catholic sphere. So we'll get into that. For anybody who is not familiar or who hasn't seen you on, Fox Business or whatever, give us a little bit of an intro to who you are and what your company is today.
Sure. So I've been around a long time. I've been a financial guy for probably 40 years. I can't believe that. Some of my friends are actually retiring, which I cannot imagine. But
boring.
I see. I'm a financial guy. Who was a normal financial guy. Molly and I met in Duquesne many, many moons ago, and we have 5 grown children, all of which who live in New York right now, but we're trying to correct that. 3 grandchildren. And over the last probably 10 or 15 or 20 years, we've become more focused on building a kind of our faith has become more important to us. As a result of that, we become extraordinarily close to the Sisters of Life. We're extraordinarily close to the Sisters of Mary in the Third World. And we started a maternity home in Pittsburgh. So all this kind of Catholic stuff happened while I was becoming the vice chair of Legatus. As a result of that kind of all baked together. And some of that media stuff you were talking about, we've now converted some of that into like a Catholic. We started a company called Aquinas Wealth Advisors, we're trying to make like a Catholic nerd wallet, like a Catholic environment where people can live their whole lives from a faith perspective. They kind of push us in a corner, the secular world did. So I think we're in a position where we're starting to make some real traction there. But basically, I'm a finance guy, written a book about finance and faith-aligned investments, that kind of stuff. So I'm a finance guy who has a large business that is trying to create a Catholic ecosystem where people can live, and we're trying to spread the world. And like you said, so the goal of your show is right. The same thing. Your pod is to bring people to God and evangelize the world. And that's what we're trying to do as best we can, you know?
Yeah. Now, out of curiosity, what is your if you guys talk about it, like what is your total like size of the business and employee count? Because I know you've got a pretty big operation, if I'm not mistaken.
We have about 20 folks all in when you add it with some folks that are doing different roles. Two of my sons, which we're so happy about, you know, the joint. We have a secular side that we had for years, then we have the Aquinas side, and they both kind of jumped into that. We have just under $1 billion in assets, which is a good sized firm for these two firms together. But the traction we're getting now, it's really kind of we believe we're in a scalable hyper growth mode. It is hard to tell. You can't tell in the financial services space what somebody's doing is because there's very low barrier to entry, right? Because there's a low barrier to entry. Everybody's you know, every as I said, like in the as you know, everybody's a founder, right? In the Catholic entrepreneur space, and everyone's a financial advisor. But we have a good sized firm, which gives me the platform to do, as you said, like Bloomberg and Fox Business, that kind of stuff. There's very few people that get to do that, so I know it's a blessing. And my friend Maria Bartiromo used to say Aquinas. I said, and finally she started saying Aquinas, which I like so much. So. I really feel blessed to be part of her, you know, in that orbit because it allows me to have a larger stage, frankly, to talk.
Yeah.
About, you know?
Well, it's very nice. I mean, it's important to be Catholic in these spheres because a lot of times, you know, they're not really exposed to people of deep faith, and we have to engage with them, right? Pope Leo in his encyclical recently just talked about how we can't shirk away from the world. We have to be engaged with it. Otherwise, how are we going to bring other people to walk on this journey with us, right?
Yeah, I'm sorry. That's something for me. You know, I'm a more of a folksy type person. It frustrates me greatly when people over intellectualize Catholicism or they weaponize Catholicism. Both those are bad things, right? We're supposed to, the beauty that people are seeking is the kindness, the beauty, the love. We got to show that side of ourselves. Exactly. That's why that resonates. I love Kristen Hawkins. She's my buddy. You know, Students for Life. She fights a battle. And I love what she's doing. And she just with her the other day. But I would say, you know, my nature is to be more like Kristen Hawkins. I'd like my nature more to be like the Sisters of Life, who lead with love, right? So that's what I'm a project. We're always improving.
Yeah, and always improving, like Home Depot, right?
Yes.
You know, I know that you are a guy of many, many stories. So before we get too far into some of my major questions, I'm curious if you have a story about somebody that you encountered where, you know, their way of acting and their just example really impacted you, whether that's recently or, you know, when you were younger. I'm just kind of curious to hear some of your stories there.
I mean, I do have a million of them, and I like them. And I think as Catholics, it's our responsibility to have stories of joy. But it's fascinating. The other day, I was sitting down with a friend of mine who's very successful in business. That's something I've been studying more, kind of entrepreneurs that are very successful in business. This particular guy is in the real estate business, and he's you know, I'm 61, my goodness, he's 83, and he's vibrant as can be, and he's fully engaged. But his firm, Howard Hanna Real Estate, they have, I think, 20,000 agents. They're the largest privately held real estate firm in the country. And he came to an event we were having that he spoke at it, and his most important thing he talked about was the fact that we gave rosaries away at the event. And he and his wife were traveling somewhere in Europe. And he was telling the story about how, you know, when he started the company, his dad started it, or his grandfather started it. There was 4 employees, his mother, his dad, a handyman, and himself. And now, again, today in 20 states, and billions of dollars of transactions. And when they were in Europe, his wife's wallet was stolen. And he was, he wasn't upset about the money, whatever, the paying the money. He said they took the rosary that we had from when we were first married, right? They prayed that rosary together every day. And I thought how wonderful it was. He goes, no, and no one has given me a new rosary since then. You know, sometimes I forget, right, that we should give rosaries away, right? And it's funny. And he said, this is the most meaningful gift you could give me. And I thought, isn't that interesting that his life, you think the life is about the business, the firm, the growth, really, it's incredible. And it's really about family and faith. And I was really moved by that. Another one I thought was funny, too. The other day I was checking in a hotel. I spent a lot of time in New York. As I said, all 5 of our kids are there. We have 3 grandchildren there. And the girl's name was Guadalupe on her name tag, you know. And I said, have you been there? She said, no. And I said, you know, have you been to see Our Lady Guadalupe? She said, I haven't. Well, by coincidence, this is when, you know, you jumped the pond. I said, I knew in the car, and the valet hadn't taken my car away yet. I had some rosaries that were, when we went our last trip to Our Lady Guadalupe, I went to the car and gave her one. And I said, hey, these was blessed at the shrine of Our Lady Guadalupe where the tilma is. You know what the tilma is? She said, no, really? So I said, well, you should Google it because it's pretty interesting.
Yeah.
And she's thinking, you know, get out of the front desk, you weird person, right? I'm thinking, so I just said, okay. And I left. And I've been in that hotel probably 5 times since then. And the other day, I was checking in again, and there was a note left for me from that woman who said, "I haven't seen you the last 4 or 5 times you've been here." You know, I learned about the story of Our Lady of Guadalupe, and I asked my grandmother about it. She was a young kid, and I didn't realize what it was, and now I've been praying that Rosary. So it is a funny opportunity. It's a great opportunity to, you know, to engage with people.
Yeah.
But a name like Guadalupe, that's a pretty open, you know, you don't see that every day, right?
Yeah.
So it was a pretty open door.
Yeah, I mean, I think this is just that gregarious personality of willingness to engage people, especially in New York, right? Like I lived there for 4 years, and you know, you know, I'm sad to admit that I never really actually met any of my neighbors in my building. Like it was, you know, it's just we tend to want to kind of keep to ourselves, but in reality, we should be going out and doing these things more, and that's perhaps especially as entrepreneurs. We're willing to start things where we have a little bit of a, you know, personality behind us typically. So we should lean into that in other ways too, and engage people, because that engagement,
Yes.
you know, it's probably, you know, unfortunately very uncommon these days, right? Like how many people would take the time to even recognize that or say something to her like that? And this opportunity happens across our day all the time, but we ignore it because we're too busy or we've got so much stuff going on, and we forget about the humans in front of us.
There was a fascinating one I thought of a couple years ago. I was doing a media thing in New York, and I was sitting there, and it'll be brief, but I came in, and there was a young man there, fit guy, which I didn't like him just because he was fit to begin with, right? So he's fit guy, and he was talking to one of the TV producers, one of the stations. I was doing a secular thing, and he was swearing a lot, F this, and not being mean, but he was just saying he thought it was how you talk, and he was talking about how he ran a race and he hurt his knee, and she said she ran a race, and he probably just like really profane, but he thought he was being charming, and he left. And the woman was there alone, and she saw a thing I had. She said, "What is that word?" I said, "Aquinas." And she said, "What is that?" I said, "Well, that's, you know, one of the thought leaders of the Catholic Church." I said, "Are you Catholic?" And she said, "I was raised Catholic." And I said, "What does that mean?" I say that again. I don't understand. She said, "Well, I am Catholic." I said, "Oh, okay. I just didn't understand." And she said, "It's just been hard for me since my mother died." So she was in this Hardened New York marathon talk. And like that, just that little question, she was weeping, talking about how she'd lost her mother and she had been away from the church, and she was so deeply saddened. And I said, "Well, it's not that hard. We got an easy club to get back into. All you got to do is go right now and go to, you know, confession or whatever." And she's like, "I don't know, I'm not sure." So I called one of my buddies. You know, the Sisters of Life are always so wonderful. And I said, "Hey, this girl, the woman's here, young woman. She, you know, the kids, the TV producers are like, you know, young and great." And I said, and she said, "Well, I'll meet her." And she came down and met her and had a cup of coffee with her. And the next time I saw her, this woman's like, "I'm back in," right? So it's funny if you just ask people, it's right below the surface. And it's our job, is if you have that gregarious personality like you do, Silas, to pull it out of people, right? And to ask them, right?
Yeah, but the other part is it's one thing for you to ask that, right? But then it's another thing for you to also do what you just did, which is call somebody, right, and get them engaged, because you may not have the time to like bring them there, or you may not be the appropriate person to do that, but you can call somebody and say, "Hey, like, let me connect you with people." And this is something I do relatively naturally, is connecting people with other people who I think should meet. But a lot of people are just like, I think there's a sort of sense where people are sometimes afraid to like see something and call it out, not like in a bad way, like, "Oh, you're doing something wrong," but, "Hey, have you ever considered this?" Or, "You know what, you know, just do this," right? Like, you know, you don't have to, you kind of like force people in a way, like by accident, like, no, just meet my friend, like have coffee with them, right? And you know what's going to happen, but you just kind of like force the situation, and they're like, "You know what could harm it?" Because most people, they've already thought that in their hearts. They've already thought about these things. They just need like a little bit of a push, you know, to get over that hump.
People are so afraid of looking dumb. It's hilarious. And the older they get, the more afraid they are of looking dumb. And I always say that to Catholic leaders. When I talk, I get a chance to talk to groups a lot, and I say, "Hey, take out your phone, you're Mr. Big Time Catholic." And people like to say, "I'm on this board or that board," which is great, and it's important, okay? But I'll say, put in your contacts, FR. How many names came up? And they'll say, "Well, none, none." I said, "Well, you're Mr. Big Time Catholic. When you put in Father," I was with one of my brothers, and he laughed. He looked at my phone, and then I pulled up FR, and that sort of alerted me to it. And I had like 71 priests in there, right? Because it's our responsibility to befriend them, right? Because they need friends. And sometimes when they're younger, it's easier to a guy, you know, guys older, but they need friends. But also, people are so nervous about meeting with a priest, and they are so self-conscious about it. If you just say, "Look, come down here, the three of us are going to have a cup of coffee, he's going to meet you right here." Because the priests very much want to make those relationships, have those introductions, but they don't have the entree that we do as lay people. I had a friend call me probably a month ago, who I worked with 30 years ago. And he said, hey, I saw you on, he saw me on something. I said, oh, thanks. And he goes, how are things going? I said, great. He said, how are they with you? He said, not well. I'm divorced. I'm really in the abyss. I lost my work. I don't know what I'm doing. He was kind of rudderless. And his father had passed away recently at 90. There's many, many great priests. One of them is a maniac priest who I love, Father Dan Leary, who's one of my dear friends, who's in D.C., who's at World Villages for years. So Father Dan I met a person in D.C. a few years ago and said, do you know Father Dan Leary? I said, I do. I said, were you in his parish? He said, no, we lost one of our children. And the first time I met him, he came to our house at 2 o'clock or 1 o'clock in the morning to say Mass while our child was passing away. And I said, that's unbelievable. His service to God is unbelievable. So I said, I wonder, I called Father Dan. I said, Father Dan, can this guy come over and say hi? Father Dan's the greatest. He's a warm guy like many of these priests are. Brought this guy in, gave him comfort, gave him purpose, and really got him set on the right path. So we're all, as I said, it's right below the surface. And people can be acutely in a dark place. And if we just connect them to the right person, it can change everything. That's just beautiful.
Agreed. This episode is brought to you by Our Father Constructors and Associates, a Catholic-owned construction and project management firm that represents the church's interests in building projects. If you're a pastor staring at a deferred maintenance list that just keeps growing, or your parish is trying to figure out how to fund, build, and execute a construction project that keeps the momentum going from start to finish, or perhaps you're a religious community with a property that you know could serve your mission better, but you don't know where to start, Our Father should be your first call. They are your expert construction project manager. They help you choose the right architects, design team, and contractors, protect your budget, and you will find savings in places you didn't even know existed before the project. Most importantly, they make sure the project actually serves the church's long-term mission. They've structured and managed projects from $1 to $45 million for dioceses, parishes, schools, and monasteries across the country. Check them out at ourfather.us or email Christian directly at christian@ourfather.us. That's CRISTIAN at ourfather.us. If you've got a building need, they'd be honored to help. All right, back to the show. Now, I mean, I could ask you, I knew this was going to be an issue today because I could ask you stories for days. I know you're really good at storytelling. This is good. Well, let's move on to a couple other things that are like more, let's say more particular to some of your other wisdom that you could share. So I want to understand your idea. You have this, I think the phrase is something like how to align your finance with your faith. Can you, there's a lot to that obviously, but can you try to boil it down? Like what are the core things that the average person should consider, especially entrepreneurs?
It's a bigger deal for entrepreneurs because they're dealing with other people's monies too, like the retirement plans and so forth. Mm-hmm. But fundamentally, here's what happened. 20 years ago, it wasn't a big issue. Corporate America, we had a kind of a deal, right? An old episode of Seinfeld, George Costanza said we had a deal with the pigeons. They fly out of the way when we drive our car past. It's the same thing. We had a deal with corporate America. They weren't too radical. They'd be embarrassed if they were producing pornography or supporting anti-Catholic or anti-Christian ideology. And that's changed over the last few years. CEOs became extraordinarily emboldened and thought we cared too much about their personal opinions. And secondly, they thought they could then also marginalized Catholics. So they've toned that down a little bit, which is good, but they're folding the DEI and ESG departments back into HR. But believe me, those radical people still exist in those companies. So companies took a dramatic swing away from our faith to the degree instead of being open, they were open to everybody except people of faith. So if you didn't accept abortion, if you didn't accept pornography, if you didn't accept really radical ideology around gender identity, you were thought to be, evil, which isn't that so interesting, right? As people of faith, that we went from being the people that were relied upon for charity to be the people that were thought of as evil. So it became fairly apparent to me probably about 6 or 7 years ago, the peak of this thing. And we said, how can we help facilitate a change? And fortunately, as we had a large wealth management firm, lots of folks, we said, why don't we start a firm that's specifically decided specifically around supporting these types of investments with the goal of bringing people back to neutral. We can say, look, the technology has a lot of horrible things with it, but one great thing it has, it allows us now to pull back the curtain and see what these companies are doing. And for the first time say, I don't want to support that. Because about 90% of the time, it's not the business the company it's in, it's the social activism they've taken on. So we have, as our company, have said, why don't we actually developed a tool where people could go on the website and see what they have and get a grade, like we were back in college, A through F. for faith alignment and performance. We call it the faith and finance score. And our goal is to radically transform the world, where we say companies will no longer do this. I saw a few months ago a CEO write a letter to shareholders that said specifically, we've acquired an organization, and I don't remember the name of the organization, but it was like MySpace, not MySpace. I've dated myself horribly, the MySpace reference. Sorry. No, OnlyFans, right? OnlyFans, right? And he said, this is a site that'll help drive shareholder value and give a place for content creators, a safe place to create content, right? Which is ridiculous, right? It's the degradation of the human.
The dissonance about how they speak about these things, right? Like
it's crazy.
It's just corporate speak nonsense, and they're trying to put these good words onto something that is just like an absolute turd. Like that's not okay, right?
100%. And the idea of saying the guy would be humiliated 20 years ago to say, "Oh yes, we have a porn business." Now he's saying we're creating safe environments. And so as a result of that, we said, how do we figure this out? We developed this technology, and we're working with people all around the country, individuals, business owners, financial Catholic institutions, trying to help them align their faith and finance. I had a funny situation just yesterday where somebody called and said, we're a large organization, and we're looking at BlackRock to do Catholic aligned investing. And I was like, I'm taking crazy pills. I feel like I'm in Zoolander. I'm like, Catholic aligned investing from the guys these are the guys who brought you non-Catholic aligned investing in terms of, I always said they were one of the four horsemen of the apocalypse. Those guys are bringing in literally, and I mean this truly, I think it's the evil one, certainly. I'm not saying BlackRock, sometimes it's the evil one. There is an organization that we talk to people about all the time. About 35% of all Catholic organizations and employers own this stock. The stock is called RSI Hospitality Group, and the idea is, it's a hospitality group. And isn't that wonderful? They must own hotels for weary travelers. No, they own gentlemen's clubs, and they produce pornography. And this goes deeper than this. They were actually fined in the state of New York, RCI Hospitality Group. Why were they fined? Because they took state auditors from the state of New York and brought them in an attempt to, they saved like $20 million in taxes by bringing them to their gentlemen's clubs in Las Vegas and giving them, sucking them into that dark world. These are people maybe that wouldn't have been there otherwise. That is the definition of the evil one. So not only are they producing this stuff, they're drawing other people into it to then avoid taxes, which is even a darker and more, this kind of evil cabal. And 40% of the Catholic institutions we work with own this thing. And they don't even know they own it because it's inside of an ETF. Well, guess what? We're going to pull the curtain back, and all of us together pull that curtain back, and we're going to radically transform the world.
Yeah, I mean, it's very important because I think people forget that because if you're not driven by charity or by a pursuit of heaven, you tend to be driven by either pride or fame or money, right? And so you can leverage these things to help kind of subjugate the world properly into, you can't obviously force charity. That's the whole point of God giving us free will. Like, you can't force somebody to love, but you can at least try to prevent and do a lot of things to prevent these grave evils from continuing and make it unacceptable, right? Like, I was just back in New York City visiting last weekend, and I've been gone for a while, and I was like ranting and raving to my in-laws while I was there about like some of the things that were going on the subway, and I was like, I just can't stand it. Everybody's pretending it's not happening, and it's because nobody speaks up. And it's the same thing with the culture in general. Like with our businesses, when we're employees, we're afraid of getting fired, we're afraid of having these backlash, right? And we don't say anything, and then that's how the culture begins to slip and slip and slip. Before you know it, we're in a place where New York City now is they're rioting after the Knicks win the game, right? It's like, this is not Philly, I had to throw it in there for you. Anyways, but we'll move on from sports. But I do.
Well, fortunately, I'm in Pittsburgh, by the way.
Oh, you're in Pittsburgh. Okay.
My wife's from Philly, but
I thought you were in Philly. Okay, dang.
We do spend a lot of time in Stone Harbor, New Jersey, so that's Philly, really.
Okay.
So you're right.
Yeah, but anyways, I just had to throw that in there.
Sure.
So, but I want to understand this now.
Yes.
You work in, obviously you are doing it wealth advising. Now, I'm kind of curious how you perceive what I call it is like ROI maxing, where corporations will do everything they can to increase, quote unquote, shareholder value quarter by quarter because they're publicly traded or whatever, and as a result oftentimes they make concessions. They do layoffs just for the sake of increasing the price. They will lower the quality of the product inputs so that way the product itself kind of becomes less and less quality, and before you know it, you fast forward this like small decisions every quarter, fast forward 5 years, and you've now lost the value of the product, and the company, everything is basically kind of going downwards. Now, how does somebody recognize that ROI maxing is not the most important thing in their business or in how they're investing only? I'm not saying that you can't get good returns by investing in companies, but when you think about it, like, we are trying to get to heaven, and how do we maintain that as the most important thing over ROI maxing?
It's a great question. That's a struggle for all of us, right? Can I cut expenses? Can I bring AI in to help offset things? Can it be, I ask the question in our business all the time. I say, I don't care how we do it. What's the best way to do it? And I laugh because, as I said, two of my sons, one of them was a Wall Street guy, one was a software guy, joined us recently. And to some degree, I'm afraid to take their calls because they'll say to me, Dad, do you have a few minutes? Which means they're going to unload on me on something we're doing that could be done better. Why do you do it this way? Why? And then some of it's just developed over years and years and years because that's how we did it 30 years ago, right? So we're always looking to get better. But that's a huge issue, right? I think we have to come to a place where we believe that profitability long-term and value comes from making the right decisions. I genuinely believe that, making customers, have the best possible experience. So premier, and I think ultimately means, frankly, more opportunity. The reason I started this company years ago is to transform the world, but Molly and I had some goals around being for transformational philanthropy, right? So if our goal is to make money, the Sam Bankman-Fried guy, what of that altruism they called it, where you could like murder everybody, but then you could give it
effective altruism, yeah.
Yeah, it was the idea like you could do whatever the heck you want, but at the end, if you give money to charity, it's all good. Wasn't that kind of the idea? I think something like that, which is bananas because the people you treat along the way is critically important, and I've been guilty of that. I'm so grateful to God. My wife says, we met when we were 17. My wife says, don't judge the man by the boy. Because I spent a lot of time as a boy making poor decisions, short decisions, minimizing people around me, trying to, at all costs, to try to advance the ball. Ultimately, I realized that was a fool's errand because ultimately I think we need leaders and we need people to hold us accountable. So I ask that all the time with folks. What am I doing that isn't, the decision I made, I started asking myself probably later than I would like, is how would my wife perceive the decision I'm making now? How would my children feel about the decision I'm making now? If they knew all the facts, was that something that will hold up to the scrutiny of the people who would be the most harsh judges of me or have the highest expectation of me? How would my mom, who's God willing, we're planning her 90th birthday, how would she feel about these decisions? Because I don't know that I held myself to the highest standard, but I knew that those people held me to the highest standard. Yeah. And I didn't want to be thought a charlatan or a fraud. I wanted to be the kind of man that they would be proud of to say, this is how this person would be. And I think the short-term things, cutting and undermining quality, ultimately, first of all, it doesn't work. It might work for a short transaction, but it's not going to work long-term. And I think having in the back of your mind saying, look, everything I have, I'm a steward of what God's given me. And again, it took me a long time to get there. How do I advance his kingdom on earth? And am I advancing God's kingdom on earth by my actions now? And I don't do that enough. I want to be clear, I don't do it enough. But that's what I'm trying to really aspire to and work towards. Mm-hmm.
Quick question for all the Catholic business owners listening. Are you running your business, or is your business running you through all of the admin tasks that you're doing on a regular basis? We see so many founders doing repeatable administrative tasks, and that's why we started Paraclete VA. We bridge the gap by connecting you with high-quality, Catholic, and vetted virtual assistants from all around the world who come from our existing network so that we know we can trust them. And so can you. Many of our Catholic Founders Guild members have hired through this service and are using this to offload their finance, marketing, administrative, and other busy work so that they can focus on what really matters and growing their business. It's the stuff that needs to get done but shouldn't be done by you. The cost is simple. Pay $500 on the day the candidate starts and $500 if you're still happy with them after 30 days. Most hires take less than 10 days to fill. Just email admin@catholicfounders.com with a little bit about what you're looking for. We'll send you some candidates, you do some interviews. Most of the time, you'll have your hire in under 10 days, and this way you can start focusing on what really matters. Stop doing the busy work and start moving the needle. I mean, nobody really does it enough, right? Like, even if you're doing it to the max, there's always more, right? Because nobody's perfect. But, this is interesting. So I think I would agree that, in the long term, by doing the right thing, you have a more sustainably profitable company in the long term, yes. especially when you think about, decades or centuries in terms of how you build the company. Most people don't think that way. Right now, is everything short term. It's like Amazon delivers my stuff in a couple hours, right? Like, I just want everything immediately. There's no sense of waiting, right? Like, Well, I mean, I always marvel at the fact that people used to have to remember, like, oh, I got to call somebody when I get home because my phone's at home. Like, I would forget by the time I get home. My ADHD is crazy, but probably because of all the short-term stuff. But
Yes.
I think it's very hard for the secular people because they don't have a reason, right? They don't have a reason to understand why should I maximize longer term value, because they don't have something to live for, because they don't have eternity. And in many cases, even if they do have family or kids, no one thinks about things in the light of the next generation. How can I prepare my family properly? Like, they say, hey, we're going to just donate all of our money to charity when we die. Our kids are going to get nothing, and we're not going to set them up for the next generation. You know, I got what I got because I worked hard, and they should do the same. And nobody lives on this long-term thinking, even for their own family reasons, not to mention like faith-related stuff. So I don't know if you have any particular ideas or thoughts there.
What a dark and sad way to live. I mean, that gives us an opportunity to help those people realize there is more to this. Why are we here? Why are we created? There's nothing more beautiful message. He knew every hair on our head, right? Isn't that a beautiful message? There's a purpose to what I have, and I am a train wreck, but we're all a train wreck. And I keep thinking that. I had a friend say to me from college recently, and college was a while ago, and he said, well, knowing your background, is it a little hypocritical? You go to church. I'm like, what are you talking about? He came for us. He specifically said, I came for the sinners. I came for the fools. I came for the broken. And what an unbelievable message I just think that we have the greatest story ever told, right? I'm wearing this watch that makes me laugh. One of these fat crown of thorn watches. And I look at it, and one of my sons was making me laugh because he said, Dad, he always calls me he knows me. He always makes fun of me, frankly. And he said, "What is John 3:16?" He said, "What is that?" And I said, "I'm not sure." And I knew because I knew he'd love that material. What a hypocrite! You're wearing a verse on your watch and you don't know what it is, because that would play in his narrative of like what a buffoon his father is. But I mean, he gave his only son that with those who know him will live forever. Right? This story is unbelievable. And if we just in the Eucharist we have these things that give meaning to us, because what a dark place to sit in. Private equity, I think there's great things in private equity. It has hurt us as a society in some way, because to your point, everybody says EBITDA. What's my multiple? That's a question. Who said that 20 years ago? What's the multiple in your industry? Now everyone's saying, look, it's 10 times EBITDA. If I can drive costs down, I get EBITDA up. I created an enterprise value that's 5 times greater, right? And we're seeing people get exits, and there's some great. The best philanthropists I know are people of faith, and they're building things all over the world. I'm so excited to be a small part of that. But again, what a darkness to say. Have you met, by the way, I'm sure, Father Corwin? He's the Dominican on the West Coast. He's a good dude. I talked to him a little bit. He was like the 10th guy at Microsoft, the 12th guy at Microsoft. Made a fortune, and he was literally talking to his patent attorney. He started his own company. He wrote a book. My book, I think, we're my friends at Sophia Presser helped my book go. The Faith and Finance, Aligning Faith and Finance. Corwin sold 750,000 copies of his book about how to use the internet. Anyway, he was in his lawyer's office in San Francisco, and he said, "Why do you have a crucifix on your desk?" And he said, "Because I believe Christ suffered, died for our sins, and gives us everlasting life." He went from a radical. His big issue was that day he had to build a bigger boat. He had a boat, but he's like 38 or 40, and he's like, "I got to get a bigger boat." Like, what do you got? I got to get a bigger boat. I think 5 years later, he became a Dominican and gave everything away. Now he's preaching all over the world. He's a great guy. What an unbelievable story. So my point is, as I said, it's this deep, and we just got to get in there. That's all.
Yeah, yeah. I think I appreciate the perspectives there. I'm curious how you personally, maybe with your clients too, but how you personally view excess income, because I think a lot of entrepreneurs, if they get good at what they're doing, like God willing, they start to make some money, their bills are paid, and then they have extra. Like, how do you view this? Do you view it as, we should just continue to invest in the business, employ more people, maybe, take less profit and pay our employees better? Should we be more involved in philanthropy? Because, the Pope even said in his encyclical, we want people to work and to give them, fulfilling employment rather than just giving them money. So, like, how do you think about excess income?
Mm-hmm. Great question. It's frustrating. When we do our conference, we talked about that, Catholics at the Shore. We have it down in Stone Harbor. And my buddy Eustace Mita, who's a great Catholic leader on the East Coast, he has kids that have special needs in his work in there at the hotel. And everyone's got a great culture. He's built a corporate culture I've seen like nowhere else. And I say to myself every time, why don't we have these people work in our office yet? We're big enough. We can have people work with them. And I haven't done that yet. So that's something I'm glad I'm saying out loud now, Silas. So it forces me to do it. Forced. I want to do it but excess profit is a tough thing, because we like nice stuff, right? We all want nice stuff. The point is, at some point, you get where Father Corwin was, where you're like, I already have a boat. Okay, I guess I got to get a bigger boat. I don't even know what it is. I think employing people is critical, and I would also say philanthropy is critical. I think you have to get to a place in your life where the joy comes from helping others. I was in Mexico City. We go to the World Villages where Father Aloysius Schwartz, 200,000 alumni from the worst person in the world. They take these people out of unbelievable object poverty and give them dignity. Girls' town and boys' town. If anybody, we're going down in October on a pilgrimage. You got to go see Girls' Town. You have to see the Tilma. But you're seeing those kids, right? I said, sister, what can we do to help? She said, we need a new well. We need water. There's 3,000 girls living there. And I said, how much is it? And she said, it's 50,000. And I said, okay, 50,000. Well, maybe my brother and I got a brother's prize. Maybe we could figure out a way to do this. And then she, after a few minutes, she said, it's not dollars, it's pesos, which was like, it was 100,000. It was like this shockingly low price. It was like $6,000 or $8,000 could give water to all these people, right? And I think to myself, what a lesson that is. We get so caught up in this is insurmountable. And oftentimes it's just something we got to, jump in the water and see how it goes. But excess profits, again, I'm not answering your question, I apologize. I think excess profits are problematic. And at some point we have to be philanthropy. You have to lead with philanthropy and giving some away. Then the problem is, though, the more you give away, the more you make. That's been my experience. That's been so many people. So the problem compounds, but I think it's about giving it away and being a leader and being not afraid to talk about it. Yeah. And then younger people, when we get in our 40s and 50s and 60s, younger people need to hear us say it because then they'll be less embarrassed. I always tell people, young people, that they don't run the company. So I say, put a small crucifix on your desk. It'll transform your office because other people won't come to you and show you gross stuff on their phone. They won't send you inappropriate stuff. And initially they'll say, he's a little weird maybe, or they may not say that. They may think that. They may not even think it. But over time, what happens is people have a tendency to watch their language and it elevates the dialogue because everyone either realizes or hopes there's something more than this just, this veil of tears, right? So I think it's if we do already have that belief, it's our job to share it for sure.
It's so interesting. I talk all the time about with entrepreneurs or the events that we host, trying to just say there's very small things that you can start doing if you want. We all sit around and complain about the culture and how nasty it is and all that stuff. There's small, tangible, easy things that you can start doing to fix these problems, right? And just start doing them, right? I think that the action component is always important. You can't just sit around and talk about how we're going to make the world a better place. You have to go act on it, right? Our faith is a faith of action, right? If we have true faith, we will be known about our faith will be known by our actions, right? I know the Protestants don't like to hear that, but
exactly. What are we arguing about there? It's so crazy, right? Yeah.
So we're going to run out of time quickly, but I want to ask you your perspective on Gen Z. Do you have any perspectives on the role of Gen Z in kind of the reigniting of the faith in the church
and exciting,
and how you like to engage with them? I'm just kind of curious your perspective here.
Yeah, and I want to say just for a quick mention something you said before. I'm so exhausted by people that poo-poo and they weaponize Catholicism and they say don't do that, and then they use the fatal words of anybody. You were talking about taking action, which I love. I want to, I've done judo and jiu-jitsu for 50 years. I want to choke somebody out when they say this. Is it sustainable? Is it sustainable? That's a coward's way. Yeah, correct. Give one guy say, I want to open a food bank. Is it sustainable? Who cares? If you fed one guy for one day, that's all you need. If it goes 2 days, if it goes to nothing ultimately, everything ultimately will close one day, whether it's 200 years from now or 2 weeks from now.
People also always say, are things scalable? And I'm like, that doesn't matter, right? It doesn't matter because it's human connection. It's one-to-one. You shouldn't worry about, I shouldn't build this business because it's not scalable. Everybody thinks about, Silicon Valley VC scalable businesses. It's who cares? Just build a business where you treat the people properly. And yes, it might be hard to allow your employees to have subsidiarity. It's not scalable in that sense to an extent, but it's the right thing to do. So just do it anyways. Stop thinking about
absolutely. That. And when people say I'm depressed, I don't know what's going on. I don't know who I am. Blah 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 blah. And you were talking about Gen X. Is that what we're talking? Gen Z. Gen Z. But I say, shut up and go give somebody a sandwich. There's a million food banks. Just do that once and you'll feel better. The other day, Sister Margie called me from Tanzania. And she said, Chris, what's going on? I said, Sister, I'm mad. I got all this stuff going on and blah, blah, blah. And she said, I said, I built the machine that's eating me. I built the machine that's poking me, which is funny. She sent me a picture of a young man. She said, Chris, this guy just walked. His parents sent him to our home in Tanzania. He walked 7 days. He only had food for 2. She said, so after we got him recovered, and I should send you the picture. It's unbelievable. After he recovered, he ate 2 pounds of oatmeal. And I said, okay, walking across the desert by yourself for 5 days is more than someone not sending me back a form to make me feel better about a transaction, right? Whatever I was mad about. So put it on the scale. But I'm so excited, when you go to New York, as you know, when you go to St. Vincent up there on 68th, right, or you go in the Village and you see all that's going on, but that's not the only place it's happening. You know, the church right on Park, which is the Church of Our Savior. It's everywhere there.
Everywhere.
Because people are seeking it. It's exciting. You see those kids on YouTube and all the stuff that's going on. I have never been more excited for young people. And I look at my kids, I think to myself, you know, they're between 35 and 25. I'm thinking to myself, this is an exciting time to be alive. It's an exciting time to be accounting. It's an exciting time to be in business, because the opportunities for philanthropy and changing people's lives is unbelievable. So I'm excited to partner with the young people and try to help them, you know, to the limited degree I can be of help, and also and I think it's our responsibility to be unafraid and talk about it out loud, to say God bless you to people, not to say I'll be thinking of you, and not even to say anymore I'll be praying for you. I say, can we pray now? Which is hard to do. If you do it, I've had at least 5 instances where other people come and join us. We'll play golf. This is a simple thing. If you play golf, first of all, always take a priest with you, right? Because why not? Because they need friends. If they don't go with us, they're going to be. What happens when you live alone? You get weird, right? It's our responsibility to give them community. That's our job. We give them community. And I'll say, look, before we start, I'd really appreciate it if you could give us, you know, a blessing. So on the first tee, I can't tell you in the last, and I'm not a big golfer, I'm not a good golfer, but we'll have 20 guys come over. And like, it just changes the environment. So our job to lead is very important. And when young people see that, there's a whole new opportunity. And the kind of the guys in seminary now are much more kind of, I don't know, inspirational, normal, you know, right? There was one time there was a place of seminaries where people went to hide. I hate to say that. And that time is long gone. I've never been more excited about the priests that are out there.
A Catholic founder is somebody who recognizes that they are called to be an instrument of God's will in the world. We're not building a business for our own sake. We are simply stewards. If that describes how you think about entrepreneurship, we want you in the Catholic Founders Guild. We're growing an association of Catholic business owners who believe in these things deeply so that we can invest in, buy from, and support one another. We do this through our exclusive membership directory, monthly group calls, and our group chat. But there's a lot more to it than that. The Guild has a lot to offer. The cost is only $10 a month or $100 a year. So if you believe that you were created to create, join the Catholic Founders Guild today. You can do so by going to catholicfounders.com/subscribe and upgrade to any paid subscription. See you in the Guild. It is very exciting to see the engagement. I think, you know, I could end up talking about this too long, but the short version of my opinion here is that I think Gen Z have grown up in a situation where their, you know, basically nonsense was being like foisted upon them and just like dumped upon them like bucket after bucket, and they couldn't do anything about it in the classroom. So they learned how to be rebellious to whatever extent they could to exert some sort of control over their life, because they couldn't leave class. Like, they had to just kind of deal with the woke nonsense, and they recognize the hypocrisy and the stupidity behind all the nonsense, and they're willing to change things. So I've noticed that they are very willing to work together to join communities and to actually do something about the future, rather than just kind of like saying, hey, you know, it is what it is. So one question for you though is like, how do you, whether it's with your kids or with other younger professionals, how do you try to engage them and help them to grow in like financial success, for example? Because a lot of my generation are, you know, complaining about the fact that they can't afford a house, these different things. But what I oftentimes find is that people of the older generations, Gen X or boomers, they're not as willing to actually do real help for the next generation. They're more so like, oh, I'll give you advice, and that's it. Like, they don't even make introductions. They don't go into business with them to like give them a chance. How do you do this with your kids or others?
The reality is, at some point you have to engage people, right? Because we get old, and we need other people to come in behind us, and we need leaders, which is true. You know, and you were talking about before, they are so mad about a lot of the stuff is born out of compassion, right? It's misguided compassion now where we are now. It's bananas where we are now, but it was born in compassion. The idea was to treat people with love and dignity. Who does that better than our church? So, but I think it's our responsibility to help these people and mentor these people and help them. And I look at the people I admire most, and I say to these guys, over my lifetime, the 10 or 15 or 20 guys I look to that have really hit the ball out of the park and done enormous things professionally, I look at them almost always and say, and they're so willing to share and also be mentors and just have spend a few minutes with somebody and give them specific instruction. But I would say something else. The guys that are saying, I can't afford a house, It's the same thing. How come these two people that are doing like parish ministry, husband and wife, and 3 kids, are still giving money away to charity? They're giving not a huge amount, but they're giving it away, and they also have a home. It's because we've gotten the priorities wrong. People are getting married now at 34, 35, and saying, we were hoping to have a family, and we're going to do this stuff now, but we wanted to wait till we had stuff. It's better not to wait to have anything, right? It's better to grow up together, in my opinion. And I do think that's going to start to change a little bit more, because people are saying, why did I wait so long for this? And they're going to tell their children, I'm so mad about, Dad and I waited till we were 35 to get married because we missed all this opportunity to be together and to grow as a family together. And that would mean financially as well. But as it relates to helping young people, I think it's just a matter of being open and chatting with people, giving them assistance, and then giving them kind of specific strategies around. For example, I can't afford a house. It's like, okay, you pay Equinox $273 a month. Let's start right there. Let's keep going, and let's really get to what's going on now. Consumerism is still out there, and it's still really it's a tool of the devil in a lot of ways. And I think we have to tone that down and look what's important. Because every time I look at the people who are doing the most, it's the people that have the least so many times. And I think that's a great thing to show people.
Yeah, I definitely agree. I've had some secular friends where I've talked about, because they've asked me about my perspective on children, and we've talked about abortion. I say, like, we got to trust in God for all these things, and they're like, well, it's too expensive. And I said, well, you got to remember, like, I grew up in the middle of nowhere. We were on food stamps. Like, the people around us all have tons of kids, and you know why they get by? They get by, spending like several $100s a month, right? Not including rent or something, right?
Sure.
Because they don't have subscriptions to everything, right? Like, they don't.
Yes.
These are luxuries, and we assume that they are like basic necessities, which they are not, right? The only thing that's really necessary is your rent and your phone bill, in my opinion, right? And I guess your electricity stuff like, and food. So it's like, you don't need all these things, and you can actually go out and you can have friends. You can do things more simple. You don't have to go out, to a steakhouse every weekend just to post on Instagram.
Isn't that the truth? Instagram and generation. But as you said so accurately, it's coming up empty for people, and that's why the churches are packed, and those people are going to the pizza and the stuff all that stuff. And I love those guys. I mean, every time I'm up there, John Paul and all those guys up in St. Vincent. I always say it wrong. Thank you. Those guys are great guys, and people are drawn to them. The Sisters of Life, did you see the video of them playing basketball the other day?
Yeah, it was great.
And it's funny, we were at the gala the other night. It was fantastic. But the average age was probably like, whatever it was older. And I'm thinking they hit a whole different generation of people. And Sister, Sister Mary Casey? She's awesome. Her sister Casey has Down syndrome, her twin sister. They spoke at the March for Life about 4 years ago, killed it. Casey's the killer. I have life, I have purpose, I have a job, and Mary Casey's the best. She gave it, a couple years ago they came to Catholic at the Shore, which was fantastic. And I don't want to kill you with stories, but I'll give you one. I think it's funny. We wanted her to come and do the same thing she did at March for Life, and I called, and I'm pretty, they have a website request form to have them come speak, and they're asked to speak everywhere. I'm not necessarily, I'm not necessarily the website fill out the form guy, so I called somebody and said, hey. Yeah, I said, hey, could you guys come? And I talked to a lovely sister who I didn't know, which was unusual. She said, boy, Chris, they were just recently in D.C., and she lives all the way out in Denver, the sister with Mary Casey, the sister, the twin with Down syndrome. So it'd be hard probably for them to come, that would be a long trip for them to come back and go to New Jersey and give that same talk again. That would be very, very difficult. I said, sister, you're probably right. I guess I'm thinking a little bit too much. Maybe I should. By coincidence, another Sister Life called me later on an unrelated issue, and I said, I was thinking of, how great it would be if Sister Mary Casey and her sister Casey, and she just said, you mean they could come to Catholic to the Shore and they could give that presentation, light people on fire? I mean, she only lives in Denver, and it's been months since they gave that last speech. I'm sure, and she called the mother said, great, put her on a plane. So I thought you understand the two different perspectives. Yeah. I want to be the guy that says, why not? Let's give it a shot. Let's see what happens. If it fails, if it falls on its face, who cares? And I'm excited about the future. I think young people need our support to be lit on fire and to understand it's okay. It's our job to say it's okay. And I'm not shunned by society. And especially now, there's really been a new voice for people of faith, which is just so inspiring.
Yeah, absolutely, man. We could talk forever. We'll probably have to do this again. I have a lot of other questions I would like to ask you at some point, but let's wrap up here. Give us just kind of the call to action where people can, I know you referenced it quickly, where they can get your book and where they can go to sign up or learn more about that pilgrimage you mentioned.
I think if they would just go to AquinasWealth.com, we have all this stuff on there because we have the book, we have the October 9th through 12th to go to Guadalupe. It's the best trip I've ever been on. We have stuff about also how to They don't need to work with us. We have a tool on there. If someone's saying, hey, are my investments aligned with my faith? They could literally link their account to it and get a report that's completely up to them what they do with that information. So AquinasWealth.com is very helpful. And we have a maternity home in Pittsburgh called Mary's Place where Molly and I started a few years ago, which we're very excited about that. I would encourage anybody who's listening, who we're talking about, is it sustainable? We said, let's give it a shot. I don't know if it'll work. And here we are 6 years later, and our friends have rallied around us. This maternity home, we've helped to serve about 70 women who live there over time, babies that are here, and children that wouldn't be here. And it's just, everyone's looking for an opportunity to jump in the pool. They're afraid. And if we just jump in first, they'll jump in with us.
Yeah, exactly. You can make social contagion, right?
Yeah, great. That's a great way to say it.
I love it, man. This has been a pleasure. I really appreciate you coming on, man.
Thank you.
This has been great. We'll have to stay in touch on these things.
Honor to be on there. God bless you. God bless all you're doing, okay?
All right, everyone. Thank you so much for tuning in to this episode with Chris. I want to leave you with a kind of small exhortation. When it comes to money and investing, I want you to ask yourself this. Do you view your money as something to increase for your own benefit, or for your own benefit solely, I should say? Or do you see your money, more specifically your excess capital and income, as a gift to be put to work to build up the church, your community, or just generally speaking, those in your sphere of influence? In other words, what is the one thing that you can do today to start making your money more in alignment with your faith? Maybe you can use the Aquinas Wealth screening tool to figure out which of the stocks that you should pull out of and put your money into other stocks that are more aligned with your Catholic beliefs. Maybe there's ways that you could be spending your excess money, right? Are you investing in projects or supporting things that really need help here and now? Or are you saying, you know what, I'm playing things more cautiously and I'm putting a lot more in towards my retirement accounts than I really need to at this time in my life? Just really ask yourself, what is the core thing that you can do to allow your excess capital or income to be used to build up the kingdom? Again, as always, if you enjoyed this episode, I'm asking you, please do share this with somebody else who you think would benefit from it, whether that person is a Catholic business owner or somebody who is Catholic who is thinking about building a business or starting a side hustle. Please share with them. This is the best way for us to grow. And then if you're not already, please do subscribe to us wherever you listen to your podcasts, whether that's YouTube or your favorite podcasting player or Substack. Just give us a follow there. That way we can continue to get better rankings. If you can leave a review, please do that as well. And if you are interested in joining the guild, I encourage you to check out the guild by going to join.catholicfoundersguild.com. We are building a group we've got about 150 people now, builders and just people who are interested in becoming saints, but they're called to entrepreneurship. And we're learning from each other every day. We're helping each other out, buying each other's services, coaching each other, holding each other accountable. There's just a lot of really beneficial things that are going on in the guild. And again, it's only $10 a month or $100 a year to join, so anybody can afford it. You can go to catholicfounders.com/subscribe, or just go to join.catholicfounders.com to learn more about what we're up to. And again, big shout out to Our Father Constructors and Associates for sponsoring this episode. If you need any sort of real estate project created, or you're building something and you want it done properly, on time and on budget, reach out to them. You can learn more by going to ourfather.us. Christian and his team are absolutely incredible. I've known Christian personally for a while now, a very good friend of mine and somebody who I respect deeply. So I'd highly recommend checking out their services. All right, guys, thank you so much for tuning in today. Before we leave you, I do want to tease that we have a very special episode coming out this coming Sunday. So please stay tuned for that. Assuming all goes to plan, it should be coming out then. But God bless you guys. Thank you so much for tuning in. Thank you for the work you're doing. And don't forget that you were created to create. You have a divine calling, so answer that calling. God bless you, and see you next time.